With The Last Jedi upon us all this weekend, I wanted to go over one of the popular fan theories that I actually buy into probably the most out of all of the theories out there. This would actually be the Reylo theory. And before you freak out, I want to explain how it's not going to be as corny or as bad as people think and why I definitely think it's going to happen. Let's talk about it. What is up, YouTube? It's Josh. This is the Den of Nerds. Holy crap, it's the Last Jedi weekend. I'm actually recording this the day that I go to see The Last Jedi. That is Thursday, December 14th. I don't know when you will check this recording out, as it is spoiler free and will be probably one of the only spoiler free videos that I put out this weekend, because as soon as I see this movie, I'm going balls deep on spoilers, theories, and all sorts of stuff like that. So if you like Star Wars, subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be doing all sorts of content surrounding The Last Jedi. Oh, and shout out to Rashad Robinson, who got the nerd card question correct in my latest Venom movie video. You definitely know your stuff when it comes to comic books, so shout out to you. There will be another nerd card question at the end of this video. So I'm going to try to quickly run through all this. Remember, this is spoiler free. I want to talk about basically why Reylo makes sense and why the amazing amount of evidence for it out there exists. Real quickly too, it's fascinating to me that this whole thing started with a group of shippers and fanboy and fangirls that basically just liked the crazy idea of them being together. As they looked into it further, they uncovered an overwhelming amount of evidence to support this idea. I actually think this is not as subtle as people think, and yet it will catch a lot of people by surprise. Okay, so the first thing I want to get into is the symbolism. So let's start the theory breakdown with an image. Now, this image is one of my favorites from The Force Awakens. In this photo, we see Kylo and Han on the bridge, and they're below Rey in the shot. They're literally at the bottom of the photograph, right? And they're also over this pit, which I think is symbolic too. But this ray of light here comes shining down on Ben Solo and his father. It literally comes from where Rey is at. Now, in the film, Kylo is contemplating coming back to the light side in this scene. J.J. Abrams confirms as much in the director's commentary. Kylo was not toying with him. He didn't always think he was going to kill his father. He was truly conflicted on the bridge. I am being torn apart. Remember, he says that. Now, Star Wars does a lot of stuff with imagery and symbolism, and I believe this shot in particular is incredibly symbolic, and so is the scene, because after this, the light disappears from where Rey is. The Rey disappears, darkness envelops Ben, and he turns fully to the dark side in that moment. Now, right after that too, just real quick here, he actually is sorrowful, he feels pain, and he's actually weaker than he has ever been. But I want to next go into a trope. By the way, none of this was originated by me. There's a ton of groups out there, YouTubers, Reddit posts, all sorts of stuff where this evidence comes from. So I don't claim ownership of any of it. I do just aggregate it, hopefully in an interesting way, and present it to you guys in a way that makes sense. So one of the big things here is the trope of death and the maiden, okay? If you've watched the Vincent Vendetta videos, he goes over this in part 3. Apparently there's some girl Reddit user that wrote a 17,000 word document about this. It's pretty crazy. But anyways, the death and the maiden trope is essentially a love story of sorts that kind of permeates a lot of old literature and ancient storytelling, whether it be verbal or written down. We have modern representations of it in the Phantom of the Opera and Beauty and the Beast. Basically, the young maiden feels sorry and pities the monster type figure. And what we realize as the audience is that this monster was created by circumstances, and although they do own responsibility, they're not innately evil. In the Phantom of the Opera, the Phantom is captured at a young age and abused by some older dude, and that could be what's going on with Snoke and Kylo Ren, so you can see the parallel there. So a couple of different things happen in the movie that make people believe that they are more or less intentionally playing off of the death in the maiden trope. Number one is the sweeping of Rey off her feet when she is taken aboard Kylo's vessel. You know this part from The Force Awakens. He makes her go to sleep, picks her up literally off her feet, and carries her in his arm. Now this happens in almost all of the death in the maiden stories. Phantom of the Opera, Beauty and the Beast, although I don't remember if that happens in Beauty of the Beast. I'm assuming it does, but I haven't watched or read or whatever you do with Beauty and the Beast in a long time. But essentially this happens in a lot of those movies and stories. So Kylo does this. By the way, John Williams does put the Romeo and Juliet theme into that part of The Force Awakens. It's of course adjusted and more Star Warsy, but those are the same notes. It's the same melody. Now, when Rey wakes, Kylo is kneeling and watching her sleep. That also comes from the death in the maiden trope, which is very interesting. The next point I want to talk about is the fact that Kylo and Rey are co-protagonists in The Last Jedi. And there's no spoilers here. This is all based upon stuff that was said before the movie came out. I haven't even seen the movie at the point of this recording. So playing off of the symbolism thing, there are comments that have been made by the cast and the crew about the film and the characters that hint towards the Force love connection. Some of the most recent and interesting comments have been about Kylo and Rey being co-protagonists. There were comments made by Ryan Johnson where he says that they are more or less two halves of the protagonists in our story, that they are co-protagonists. I also think back to when he didn't want people to watch the Monday Night Football trailer debut for The Last Jedi. He said it was full of spoilers. But the only thing that was strange in that movie that could be considered a spoiler, and I guess trailer rather, was the fact that Kylo reaches out his hand to Rey at the end of that trailer. It definitely made us think that that was going on. Now, tying into the co-protagonist, a lot of the evidence that people point to comes from an Ellen DeGeneres interview from 2 years ago, where Oscar Isaacs makes comments about the love story within The Force Awakens. He said it's definitely there. It's a subtle love story, something that you will get upon your second and third viewing. It takes time to figure it out. And interestingly, in the director's commentary of The Force Awakens, J.J. Abrams comments about Kylo and Rey meeting for the first time, and he talks about focusing on their relationship, the fact that he could have just gotten the information out of her head there, but decides to take her, which hints at something else going on. And he literally says, Kylo is a person that Rey will have a very interesting relationship with moving forward. The next major point of evidence, and honestly you should be totally convinced at this point, a lot of this stuff is pretty crazy, but it is the novelization of The Force Awakens. In the novelization, after the mind probe scene, Kylo is told by Snoke that he can sense that Kylo has compassion for the girl. This is how she was able to resist him, not because of her strength, but because of Kylo's weaknesses. Also, it's definitely stated in the book that Kylo could have killed Rey at any moment at the end of The Force Awakens, but he decides not to. There is a part also during the mind probe scene where he literally touches her cheek and a feeling passes between them, an energy they recognize in each other. I think the point is super obvious that they are going to happen. As a couple. Now check this out. A lot of people, I think, have problems with this. They don't like love stories in Star Wars. They think the Disneyfication thing is happening here. And I just have to say, guys, think about this in perspective, okay? Star Wars is really like fairy tales. It's really fantasy, not science fiction. And one of the main tropes within fantasy and fairy tales is love stories. I mean, look at all of the early Disney films, which actually adapt stories from before. They're all different stories that are adapted and brought into a modern mythological platform that we call movies. So, Star Wars is no different, which is why the Disney Star Wars fit is so good in my opinion. Is it going to give us the hard edge, crazy Star Wars that we want? Maybe, probably not on the movies, but what it will do is take special care of adapting old perennial stories into this fantasy type setting. I think the trope of death and the maiden is there, but I think that it goes far beyond that. Kylo and Rey represent two sides of the yin yang, literally the representation of balance. Everything that we have seen within the marketing for The Last Jedi talks about the light and the darkness and the balance. If you read the novelization, it is obvious that Snoke is obsessed with Kylo because he comes from the light and the dark. The fact that Kylo is tempted by the light, which is something we've never seen in Star Wars before this trilogy, really showcases that they are focusing on the pull to the light and the pull to the dark and the balance and reconciliation of those two. I truly believe that Rey and Kylo getting together, discovering the Force together, and going on to either establish a new order of Jedi or a new chapter in the passing and knowledge of the Force, it's a great thing for Star Wars, and it makes total sense. Oh, and for the romance part, there's romance in both of the trilogies before. It is Han and Leia in the original, and it is Anakin and Padme in the prequels. And by the way, guys, in the second installment of both of those trilogies is when the romance blossoms and when we get that kiss. We could see that again in the second installment of our current trilogy, The Last Jedi. But that is essentially all I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope it wasn't too long-winded. I just wanted to bring these points to you, talk about Reylo. Man, I really think it's going to happen, and I'll be doing videos reacting to the movie if it does indeed happen and where I think we'll go from here. But what do you guys think about this? Do you hate Reylo? Will you freak out if it happens? Or are you kind of intrigued? I mean, I think it could be interesting, but I want to know what you guys think. All right, let's check that nerd card really quickly. I want to know, what is the name of the new evil black BB-8 droid? This droid is a version of BB-8, but he is for the First Order. What is the name of that droid? Answer that question in the comment section below. As I always say, I hope you are having an awesome and nerdy day. See ya!